What Does It Mean to Be an American? By Jessica Savage. Throughout the year, many figures, both from history and literature, show themselves as demonstrators of several different civic values. The 10 core civic values are what are used to differentiate between the average and the great. If one aspires to be great, one must simply live by the civic values and fulfill at least one of the values to the fullest. The civic value that seems to be the most important is justice. Justice is a quality that maintains rightness in the world. One who has justice always does the right thing, no matter the consequences. It is impossible to be a quality ruler without being just. It is imperative for all truly successful people to remain true to justice. Justice is a civic value that is constantly explored. There are 4 separate figures that especially are demonstrative of justice, and this documentary is to exemplify those figures. George Washington. George Washington is argued to be one of the greatest historical figures of all time. He represents America and was a large part of their independence as their own nation. Born and raised in colonial America, he understood very well how the country worked from a colonist perspective. He was intensely involved from the start. He was just as unsatisfied with Britain holding America in their control as many other radical men of his time. He began to put his foot in the door when the protests against the Townshend Acts of 1767 became more popular than ever before. He opposed other British acts like the Stamp Act of 1765. He was a strong believer in rights for the American colonists. He did not agree with Britain's policies because they did not help the colonists. He fought for what he believed in. He was a powerful leader and quickly rose in the ranks. As the Revolution slowly reared its head, Washington never slowed down in the race. He was chosen as a delegate for the Continental Congress that was held in Pennsylvania in 1774. As a delegate, he was able to speak his mind for the good of his home state, Virginia. His goal was to represent Virginia and bring righteousness for his own state and for America by fighting for independence. In the Revolution, he was commander-in-chief. He was known for his insane bravery and his outstanding leadership as a commander. Without George Washington, it could be argued that we never would have won the American Revolution. Nonetheless, his victories do not count as much as his motives behind them. As a commander-in-chief, Washington took it upon himself to lead an entire body of people who were all working towards one goal, to free America. His actions were just, beginning with his heart. People saw the justice in his heart and voted for him as the first president of the United States of America. This was an extremely difficult job, as one can imagine. On top of working to care for and oversee the livelihood of an entire nation, Washington had to individually shape what it meant to even be a president. All this Washington took as his own responsibility and molded the country into a society that would eventually become the strongest body of people on the planet. In literature, it is somewhat easier to detect civic values in characters than it is to study civic values in actual historical figures. This is because authors can predetermine the makeup of a specific character. One character in literature is particularly just. Huckleberry Finn from The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn displays justice throughout the book. As he grows older, he begins to understand how difficult it may be to make the right choices in life. There are several instances in which Huckleberry Finn wages a personal battle inside his heart to try and figure out what he should do at different points within the storyline. The main cause for all of Huck's inner stress is the situation he is in with Jim, the runaway slave. Huckleberry Finn had known Jim through his family, so it came as a surprise when he discovered Jim hiding away on an island in an attempt to escape from the life he was living as a former slave. Jim made Huck promise to never tell anyone what he had seen on the island, and Huck proves to be a man of his word. In keeping his promise to Jim, Huckleberry becomes frighteningly aware of the bond he is breaking with the rest of society. Running away with Jim puts Huck in the same social class as Jim. The rest of society would have thought nothing of turning Jim in and returning him to his family where he would continue his life as a slave. But Huck becomes close to Jim, and as their bonds become stronger, Huck has a harder time deciding what to do. He does not know whether to conform to society and break his forbidden friendship with an escaped slave, or to help his friend to freedom. Justice helps him to decide. Huckleberry Finn knows in his heart that the right thing to do would be to rescue Jim. Jim loves him like a son, while the town in which Huck lived just saw him as a reckless and dirty boy. Huckleberry Finn was confident enough in his own just actions to decide for himself what the difference between right and wrong was, and as a result grew from it. Themes present themselves through the actions and personalities of characters in literature. If an author aims to write around a specific theme, he or she might write through the perspective of one or more characters. In the case of To Kill a Mockingbird, the theme of justice is explored through the qualities of Atticus Finch. Atticus is a lawyer who was chosen to represent a black man in court accused of raping a young woman named Mayella Ewell. It is Atticus's duty, as a man of justice, to fight as hard as he can alongside Tom Robinson, the black man, to try and ensure Tom's agreeable outcome. Like Huckleberry Finn, Atticus is faced with the near impossible decision between right and wrong. If Atticus decides to defend Tom Robinson, he and his family will be under a huge strain from society. Even though the strain is not necessarily well-deserved, Atticus believes with all of his heart that all men are truly created equal. He knows that the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do sometimes, but his just qualities help him to remain true to the right thing. Instead of following along with the crowd, Atticus chooses to defy society and do what he thinks is right. In doing so, Atticus starts a small chain reaction. His actions are reflected onto his children, Scout and Jem. They see their father exemplify justice, and in turn are raised with justice. They themselves become just as they mature into young adults. Atticus shows many people in the town, and also to the reader, that doing the right thing will carry on and pay forward to the future and even to the next generation. His just actions created one of the greatest figures in literature of all time. Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt was a man who took matters into his own hands for the good of America and essentially the entire world. He oversaw the continuation of the building of the Panama Canal. Without his initial push to pick things up where the French left off, we as a worldly power would not have the Panama Canal as we do today. Theodore was dedicated to overseeing the completion of the Panama Canal for the good of the entire world. Because of him, trade was improved and trade routes were cut down significantly. He did the right thing when he took over the project and was committed to seeing it through. He was managing the project by himself, it seemed, and his absolute insistence on completing the canal helped nations around the world, large and small. For America alone, it cut trade routes by almost 2/3 and also cut the travel time in half, from 60 days to a mere 30. Roosevelt did himself and the globe justice by working on the completion of the Panama Canal.